Welcome to the subject Introduction to Communication Disorders, History, Attitudes and Innovations. This subject is compulsory for speech pathology and audiology students and offered as an elective to students outside of these disciplines. Today's introduction will be divided into 3 sections. We will begin by discussing notions related to communication, then go on to discussing perspectives on disability, before providing an overview of the subject. We begin this subject by asking you to consider the question, what is normal communication? And who can be considered to have a communication disability? While these questions may at first seem simple and straightforward, we hope that this subject will allow you to critically examine your concept of communication disability and consider the social influence on these beliefs and values. Communication is a complex and multifaceted phenomenon. Communication has 2 key purposes: the transaction of information, getting the message across, and interaction, the building of relationships. Communication is a reciprocal process. It requires someone to communicate and someone to communicate with. Breakdown in communication can occur when either of these people have difficulty. When we think about communication, it can be divided into 2 key areas: receptive communication and expressive communication. Receptive communication explores someone's ability to receive information, both in terms of the sensory reception of information and the comprehension of sensory information. Expressive communication explores the conveying of information. This can occur in a variety of different modalities: writing, signing, gesturing and speaking, to name a few. Disability studies is an interdisciplinary academic field which expands the understanding of disability from a health science perspective to consider it as a civil and human rights issue, a minority identity, a sociological formation, an historic community, a diversity group, and a category of critical analysis in culture and the arts. The recent emergence of critical disability studies as a field asks us to look more closely at how we understand disability, and for us, as health professionals, how this might inform the way we work with and respond to people with communication disabilities. Very briefly, we will now consider the various models of the way cultures have and do understand disability. Firstly, the moral model. Within this model, disability is seen as a punishment for individual, group, or past sins. In this model, people with disabilities have been considered outsiders as a result of not only their disability, but also as a result of the perceived causes of their disability. An example of this model might be a community who believes that a child born with a hearing impairment was born this way as a result of the sins committed by her mother, such as adultery. Next, the medical model. In this model, disability is seen as an individual pathology needing treatment or cure. In this model, there is a strong emphasis placed on the need to fix a person with an impairment, to make them appear more like others. Interventions tend to be invasive and focused on the concept of normality as a goal. The social model of disability perceives disability as a human variation produced by interaction of impairment with the social environment. Within this model, disability is seen as a subsection of a community rather than being seen as separate. An example of this is people in the deaf community who see themselves not as disabled, but rather as a cultural group with a separate language. A civil and human rights model is centred on the protection of rights for all, ensuring that those with disabilities have access to the same rights as those who do not have disabilities. Within a material model, it is suggested that the built environment and human bodily limitation make meaning and experience of disability. It suggests that it is not the body that creates a disability, but how the body relates to and interacts with the environment. For example, if a person with a wheelchair is provided with ramps and an ability to mobilise easily through their environment without assistance, can they still be considered to have a disability? The final model we will briefly touch on is the cultural model. It suggests that the meaning and consequences of disability come from cultural stories, language, and images. Stop and think about what you know about communication disabilities. How did you learn about them? When you imagine them, what do you think of? Is the image that you create in your head based on things you have been told, things you've seen on television, things you've read in a book, or your own lived experience? In this subject, you are asked to consider how beliefs about communication disorders differ over time and across cultures, and how the lived experience of communication disabilities is also variable. Through lectures, interviews, and online resources, you will learn about treatments, stigma, and history. We will do this through the prism of the World Health Organisation's International Classification of Functioning, Disability, and Health. The ICF, as it's known, is a conceptual model of health and health-related domains. It marks a paradigm shift from a purely medical model to an integrated biopsychosocial model of human functioning and disability. It explores disability in all its dimensions: impairments at the body and body part level, person-level activity limitations, and societal-level restrictions of participation. It recognises that the functioning and disability of an individual occurs in a context, and as such, also includes a list of social and built environmental factors. 5 topics in this subject will focus on receptive communication. Topics include hearing loss, deaf community and deaf culture, otitis media in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander populations, cochlear implants, and issues in audiological practice. The additional 5 topics in this subject will focus on expressive communication. Topics include stuttering, multimodal communication, autism, communication after stroke, and cleft lip and palate. Through these topics, you will learn about the emergent roles of speech pathologists and audiologists, their professional innovations, and engagement in developing countries. Teaching staff for this subject comprise staff from across the disciplines of speech pathology and audiology. You can access up-to-date information about staff on the LMS page, including names and contact details. This subject is entirely online. This learning modality will be new for many students, and we hope we can support you as you navigate this learning style. We also ask that you forgive us for any technical glitches that might occur. In terms of communication, we will communicate with you via LMS. If you have any questions, please put them all on the general discussion forum. This way, it will also ensure that your question is answered in a timely manner by the most appropriate person. Tasks. The 3 assessment tasks include an individual